thank you to everyone who's come on this call. It's our second conversation about the new normal. Could I ask that everybody other than our speakers mutes, because it just helps with the background noise. I know lots of people already have, and thank you very much. And I'm just going to do a quick introduction. Bev, who's a retail and buying expert. Anna, who I believe has your own brand. Is that right, Anna?
Yes, exactly.
And Jelena, you are how would you describe yourself, Jelena?
Well, just call me Aska. Actually, I'm Aska. It's my nickname. Nobody besides my mother, when she's extremely angry, calls me Jelena. But actually, I'm a fashion journalist and a psychologist. Just an observer and a participant, I think, in life and everything.
Okay, so let me get your name right again. How do you say it?
Aska.
Aska.
A-S-A.
A-S-A-K.
Yes.
A-S.
Yes, much more convenient to pronounce than Jelena. I believe so.
Okay, brilliant. So, Bev, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, you were a part of Fashion Roundtable when we were thinking about launching. You came to see me in Parliament, and you came in to talk to me about Brexit, the gift that keeps on giving. Brexit's obviously slided off the agenda and is something we're going to pick up because apparently we're leaving in a few months. And that's still all on shed.
That line from the government, we've already left.
We've left, but we haven't left.
No.
We're in the purgatory of Brexit. For you, in someone in your side of the business and someone in your role, you're often guiding and working with brands to try and keep them ahead. How do you see, obviously this period, both of us have talked about how busy we've been, which has not been everybody's experience, but how are you guiding the brands that you work with?
Well, if I'm completely honest, there's something about this lockdown and about the situation that we're in that is forcing everybody to really question everything from the bottom up or the top down. So it's kind of a fortunate time at the moment where we are able to realign some brands. Some brands don't want to do it, and some brands really want to go back, and they want the normal to be where we were at, where they can pick up and get on with selling cocktail dresses at this price with this retailer and and that was already looking like a very shaky way of proceeding with your business model before COVID. And now with COVID, I think we've got a list of very interesting challenges for our industry and for brands. So there's brands and there's products. And I've often been the person in between the two and then the customer. So for me, yes, I know we work in fashion, but we could equally be working in any other sector. And the challenges are ostensibly the same. And I know that we're talking a lot today about creativity and the role that creativity has going forward in our industry. So there is a big questioning around what type of creativity is going to serve those businesses. I think with the bigger brands, they are in a position where, yes, they have a lot more security financially and they're able to do certainly, but they're not nimble businesses that can move as much as a small brand can. So I think it's a period of reflection. I'm encouraging people to really question who they are, so that every single person I've been working with, I've asked them, who are you and who do you want to be?
And are they the same?
They're often so challenged by that. And the other question that follows that is, who is your customer? And how are they experiencing this? How are you going to service them? So this idea of service has come up a lot, and I think it's very much, we've worked together with Roundtable and different projects where it's been a little bit about actually connecting with that ability to serve people and right the way from a shop floor to serving a customer, and to also serving the industry, you know, and serving those around us in our industry, sharing knowledge, not competing. So there's a lot of ideas around service that we're exploring at the moment, and it's not just adding, you know, £10 to your top and then donating to Trussell Trust or something, which is also good, but it's not fundamentally what I've been sort of discussing, which is how do you serve, who's your customer, which is the biggest question
always,
and what are they experiencing?
Yeah, I always ask that question of designers I worked with as a stylist, and it would be very interesting quite often because they hadn't thought about it. And even when I was lecturing, I would be asking them, well, who are your role models in the sector, and why, you know, who do you see yourself aligning with? Because then you can start to track your aims and your ambitions. And I remember working with a designer who still shows on schedule in London and is really successful. And I don't think he understood who his customer was. And for me, that was like, well, then who are you making for? Because if you're making of your perception of a woman, because he's a women's wear designer and he's a man, then you really have to start navigating her identity. What does she read? What's her cultural interests? Where does she go? Because then you can start to work out what pieces she might or might not want. And obviously, I mean, we're all working at home at the moment, so we're all quickly shifting, and we're then trying to work out what will come when we start easing lockdown. And where do you see that going in terms of what people will actually feel that they need to identify with or buy?
I mean, I think the point of the matter is that we didn't even before this need fashion and tons of clothes. We've created a monster with fast fashion where everything in that circle of consumerism is going so fast and completely inappropriately. So we are filling, you know, trash cans with clothes, which you were talking about going back, you know, I don't know, maybe to the 70s or 80s, but that wasn't the case, you know. No. That was not the case. And we are working in an industry which is completely responsible for being one of the biggest polluters on the planet. And just aligning yourself as a designer or a creative who's selling, marketing, a photographer, a stylist, supporting this whole system.
Oh, I've got this webinar. It's live. Oh, only take 1 minute.
Someone's homeschooling. Could whoever's homeschooling please just put their phone on silent? Thank you. I think they already have. Thank you. It's all our realities right now if we've got kids. So.
And I think that we've got to really think, do I really want to be part of that? And what am I going to design? How am I going to style? How am I going to retail with that fundamental reality? And then in terms of what people are going to want, and I pride myself on really studying what people want. I think that they do want creativity because creativity is inspiring. But I think they want an answer to this question. Like, how do I reuse my wardrobe? How can I make something individual for myself? And a lot of fashion designers and people in our industry are like, la, 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 that's not how we do things. You know, we need to do a shoot with a new set. We need to do this vision of our devising. And maybe that kind of worked for Alexander McQueen. It doesn't work for us at this point. You know, it worked for him, his level of creativity with building those sets, telling a story like that worked really well at that time, and no one had done it to that level. But we don't need that right now. We need to answer the question, how do we enjoy fashion, self-express through fashion without killing the planet, and knowing that yes, we are going to be on and off in a lockdown situation where you can't go to a red carpet event in the same way. So design has to answer that. It doesn't mean that fashion isn't important and inspiring and empowering, but we've also got to really question the fact that the whole of the fashion cycle it's remarkably patriarchal. It's this idea that something that you wore 3 months ago, woman, is not valid anymore. You know, it's like, I'm going to tell you. So that very tone within our industry and this idea of fashion authority, I think has to be really thought through. And I think this is a perfect moment for us to do that and actually go, what do you want to wear? Do you want to wear a jumper rather than a ball gown? Let's get you a great jumper that will last you through lockdown, past lockdown, whatever, you know? And I think the system itself of this idea of having newness and new collections and new shows every 6 months, it's exhausting, and it's ignoring the potential of actually creating a blouse or a dress or an item or a shoe or a bag that's going to be a treasure for the customer. And I know that you're an amazing vintage collector, Tamara. I mean, you get a lot out of these things, but they just keep giving, you know, and they keep reinventing them.
I mean, I started buying vintage from when I was at school, because at the time I could pick up 60s dresses in charity shops around North London and in the suburbs. And then I remember when I went to UCL, I still got a grant because I'm that old, and there was an amazing few vintage. There was one, obviously Camden had a bit, but also even in Covent Garden now where they've built, there was one on a Monday, there was one in Berwick Street, and I would find pieces. And for me, it was about the quality was of a designer level or a couture level, and some of them were at a high street price. And that's why I shopped like that, because the quality was better than what I saw on the high street, and I felt more quirky. And then when I went into styling, I still always wore a lot of vintage because I couldn't afford it. It was a cost price thing as well as the quality.
And I think the issue about quality, just before I hand over, something else I want to say is this idea that the consumer wants something that's Instagrammable, that they've seen on an influencer, that looks really colourful. It's maybe not got, you know, French seaming, or it's not well made and doesn't make their body look great, is a fallacy. And we've sucked ourselves into this influencer driven economy and left real women. I mean, I have a problem saying real women because I guess everyone's a real woman, but we've left a lot of people behind and out of that conversation. And again, I think it's that dictating to people that I think people fundamentally know what they want, and they're not presented the choices by our industry. It's an industry that favors a certain type of consumerism, and it's actually ignoring the opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. Thank you for that, and we'll come back to you soon. So Anna, I just wanted to ask you a question that we had this morning. It came from somebody. We sincerely hope that the new normal will be an all-round more inclusive industry. By this I mean highlighting local and independent makers, more inclusivity around brands and businesses at all stages. We hope that the industry will become less elitist and that everyone will matter as opposed to the select few. There has been a huge focus on community recently, and hopefully that will extend to a new supportive industry by everyone. We also hope that people will revert back to creativity, handcraft, and respecting the making, taking a focus away from the more attitude that has developed. And obviously you're where are you located, Anna?
So I lived until 2 months ago in London, but now through the whole system, I had to go back to Germany. But I'm working in between London and Munich since years. So
okay. And what scale of business do you have? How long have you been going?
So I co-founded a brand a couple of months ago, and we are focused on reusing post-consumer waste and make jackets out of it. And for us, it was the aim to bring the design and the production on one space. So I co-founded this small size brand, but I also work as a designer in collaboration with other designers. And I think this is exactly what is important in the 21st century, that as a designer, you're not just in one brand and in one little secret design process, but you exchange with others, you work with others. So I'm working as a freelancer for bigger brands, so it's all about switching the medium-sized and the smaller-sized companies, putting them together so that they learn from each other. And what I think, or what I found really interesting in London especially, we have so many social-oriented business models. If you think of Black Horse Lane ateliers or other brands that really bring back fashion to the community. And this is exactly what is missing, that fashion is coming from the people. Fashion is coming from communities. We all did, like my grandmothers, they all did like stitching, sewing at home. And since fast fashion just brought everything offshore, we have no real connection to garments anymore, to fashion. So I think especially this pandemic and the situation we're in at the moment forces us to deal again with our garments. So we have to think of how can we mend something, how can we mend our jeans to have a longer wearer face, and all of these handicrafts and all of those skills that we've lost due to sending everything away and not dealing with the actual process. Is now a new chance for us to engage with those crafts and to get a new relationship with the garments that we've lost.
I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with some of the team at City Hall at the Mayor of London's office, and I am pushing for some London solutions, as well as I'm working on a lot of pushing. I've got another call later about PPE being made in the UK, as well as masks. And when I say that, not the work that I've been doing with the Emergency Designer Network, who I fully support, helping them with some policy guidelines, which Maria and I have been working on with them. But also because I'm worried about the brands that I'm hearing from. A lot of our industry in this country is micro. It's not even SME, it's micro, they're tiny. And my concern is that no one's going to come out of this with more money, they're going to come out with less. Unless they're very clever at where they've put their money. If they've put their money into hand sanitizer or whatever, they're on a winner. But a lot of people have got less money than they've ever had since the last crash, basically since 2008, which I can remember. I didn't work for quite a few months, and I was a stylist then, and I went from loads of work to none for a few months. So I sense that we need to support, but I want built into that a sense of community, because at the moment when we shop, unless we can buy food, we're shopping virtually, which is just a win-win for people like Amazon, because they go up the algorithm, you get your Prime, it's easy. And what I'm asking them to look at is a way that we can create a platform, because there are so many London micro brands that need help, that haven't got the currency, that won't go far up the Amazon algorithm, that won't get a great deal, and they're going to go under. So I've been talking to them about that, as well as an awards thing that I would like to support, because I agree with Bev that we have a slight crash and burn issue with London, with fashion. And for me, that's not sustainable. It's a worry. If you look at Paris or Milan, and I say this all the time, you see brands that have agency, that have a long lifespan, that have a longer identity, and yes, they might bring different designers in, and those designers might come from London, from our colleges, because they're fantastic, but the name on the brand is Prada or Chanel or whoever. And I think that here it's not the case. We have, I know McQueen has become one of those big brands despite his death, but other than that, I can only think of Burberry and maybe Stella, and that's it. So in one generation, we've got maybe 2, 3. How did you feel coming out of college? Did you study here, Anna?
Yes, I studied at London College of Fashion.
And how is the arc? And because I think to come down to community, you're right. You have a bi-country community. You have your German community and your UK community. So how do you build that into a sense of community for your business, do you think?
So basically, what we have as a big advantage is that we're all connected. So we all can use Instagram, we all can use all kind of social media.
Are you using Instagram as a sales opportunity for you?
Yes, and also most important to show the people what we do. So it doesn't matter if we do pattern cutting or anything. We want to be very transparent and to show people what's the work behind the product. So yes, and what I really experienced the last couple of months was that in London it's a mixture of all kind of communities, and we all learn so much in this big hub where everyone is coming from different cultures, has different experiences, different heritage, and we all dream of fashion and being someone who makes people happy with what we create. And I think for everyone, for the new generation of designers coming from the college, our task is to bring back all of these knowledge and all of our experience to our own countries and our own communities. So for example, in London, I talk about typical Bavarian dresses and how we do the pattern cutting so that it's multiple sizes. And this culture and this heritage we use to grow and to exchange. So, I mean, it's difficult to really focus on the different clients in the different countries, but in the end, fashion connects. And also, if you have a certain aesthetic and if you have a certain value you want to express through your clothes, then you find the group of people that are interested in your product.
And do you think social media will become increasingly important for you post-pandemic when we're out anyway, in terms of trying to sell virtually?
Yes, definitely. I think it is a great tool to be transparent, to showcase and to educate. So what I did the last couple of weeks was I was mending my jeans, making like nice embroidery, and just showed other people how they can do it by themselves at home. So this is the best way to communicate and to share skills. And I think this is also, as a designer, our task to educate the consumer, and not only to sell and promote our garments, but to keep like this exchange and relationship.
Okay, thanks. So in a way, it's about virtual communities, which has certainly been part of our story at Fashion Roundtable. Thank you, Anna. Aska, I saw that you wrote something here. I just wondered if you want, sustainable is the only obvious way to go, but don't think that the struggle. Could you just expand on that a little bit?
Yes, of course. Actually, I also wrote here, and I strongly believe so, that everything that is happening was supposed to be happened way before COVID. This whole COVID thing just speeds things up. So we are just facing the inevitable. And as we know, the new reality has its ups and downs. Every coin has two sides. But I cannot help but asking myself way too many questions on a daily basis. Not only when it comes to sustainable fashion, but you also mentioned virtual reality. I think that a big part of new reality is virtual reality. And now I'm not speaking only as a fashion journalist, but also as a psychologist. Society that we are living in is strongly advocating and pushing us towards being alienated from each other. So we are spending way too much time staring at our phones. Now here we are having a Zoom meeting instead of having, I don't know, a tea in London. By the way, my family lives in Birmingham and I used to live in London as well. And this is a new reality. So I also wrote way too many articles for magazines that I write for upon the subject. It is ride or die. We have to adjust to it. Nothing is going to be the same. And we are just going to lie to each other that it will. No, it won't. We changed. World is changing. And of course, fashion industry and creativity are changing. And I strongly agree with both Bev and Anna. Creativity, individual approach is the only way to go. Of course, sustainable fashion and all that comes with the subject, vintage, buying vintage, and raising a conscience when it comes to consumerism. I think that's the target that everybody should shoot. Also, I'm communicating with designers on daily basis. Everyone are terrified, both designers and consumers. On the other hand, we're giving a very, we are slapping fast fashion, but fast fashion exists and persisted on the market because of us. I swear, I could swear that all of us are having at least one Zara thing in our closet, or H&M, or previous Top Shop. So we are here because doesn't matter how high our conscience level is, we brought ourselves here. So it's our duty to get ourselves out of this situation, exactly like this, communicating and being together, exchanging ideas. I don't see the other way. Also, Bev mentioned when it comes to haute couture and fashion as we used to know Alexander McQueen and all the shows and creativity and everything that was important back then, it is not important now. I completely agree with you. But what I'm afraid of, that it will all become important only in another shape, in a virtual shape. Take a look at Met Gala, for example, now. Yeah. Are Kardashians getting smaller? No. Is their fame shading or disappearing, vanishing? Unfortunately not. Yeah. They're getting bigger and bigger.
Literally.
So, exactly. So that kind of reality is really, something that we have to face. But on the other hand, we also had John Galliano for Dior, who did some shows like, on that level as McQueen, or I'm not talking about styles. Yeah. Yes, but now we have this new Dior with, big parts of creativity and selling industries based on what? Selling a very cheap message related to feminism. So my question will be, okay, we need to fight for our rights, for sustainable fashion, for feminism, to stand for it. But does everything has to become a trend? And who is setting those trends? Who is selling what, and who is selling what to who? So how to communicate in that chaos?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that Fiona's on the call, and Fiona wrote a really interesting article for us where she wove in utility wear, and which is one of my big passions, is utility wear from the Second World War. It was a very democratizing idea where designers came together to create clothes that met the ration requirements of the Second World War. And that for me is good design, and maybe what we're talking about here is good design rather than fashion. And I think they're two different things. And I think that what we are talking about is buying because it's needed rather than it's wanted. We did our first, we have had to do it virtually this morning, but we did the first of our evidence sessions for our representation and inclusion paper for the APPG this morning. And what came up a lot is the psychology of why we're shopping like this. For me, it comes down to the post-war growth in consumerism to get the countries out of recession across the world, and because we lost religion as a kind of force across a lot of the countries. And I think that that's where that consumer cult, as I call it, came. And now we're paying the price of that. Our kids will be paying the price of that if we don't fix it. And in a way, this global pandemic is the wake-up call of what we've all been saying in real life terms. So we do have opportunities here. The problem is, as Bev has analysed, is a lot of people want to go back to normal. Personally, I am a bit sick of living in gym clothes. I dress up for Zoom. That's the level. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I miss my mum. My dad's stuck in another continent because he went to get his teeth done and he's got stuck there, So how do we navigate that? We know this is environmentally working to shut down. We have less pollution. I haven't had what I thought was hay fever this year, because it's obviously not hay fever, it's pollution fever, right? I live right by two woods, so clearly I would have it. But at the same time, we need to make a living. We can't survive like this. So how do we navigate? I know it was the longest dentist appointment, and to be honest with you, Andrew, just to answer your question, when I saw my auntie from the village on the WhatsApp call, who's had 10 kids with spotless teeth, I was like, he should have just gone to her dentist, because she's probably never been to the dentist in her life. So there's the irony. But I wonder, Fiona, have you got any insights on utility wear and how we could bring that in? If you want to just unmute. Can you unmute?
Yes, I've unmuted.
Right. So she's not Esmeralda, she's Fiona.
Sorry.
Esmeralda's her daughter. Have you got any insights about what you wrote about utility wear and how we could bring that in? And just to give a background, Fiona writes for a lot of different publications across the Vogue and the Condé Nast and other and for us now, thank you, during lockdown. I'm very grateful.
Well, I think the main issue we need to look at is the designers collaborating with each other. I've actually been listening recently to a lot of Bronwyn Cosgrave's podcasts, A Different Tweed, and she interviewed people like Sam McKnight and Stephen Jones, who are both industry figures who were around at the very beginning of London.
And Blitz kids.
Yeah, of London, and also the beginning of London becoming a fashion capital.
Yeah.
And it was enormously about collaboration.
Interesting.
And it's that collaboration again that we're seeing now, whereupon, for instance, all the East London milliners have come together to work, all in the Visor Army. We've got all of the emergency designer network coming together to work. We've got people offering fabrics to other people if they need them. There's this enormous, very sort of collaborative spirit. And I think one of the issues has been, in terms of getting rid of the show structure, or rather rethinking the show structure, is that it takes everybody to do it, to have the confidence to do it. I remember interviewing Dean and Dan Caton, probably about 4 years ago it must have been, and they were talking about how they really wanted to combine their women's wear and men's wear shows, because they actually would like to spend less money showing, but they couldn't do that until everybody else did it too. And that is one of the major issues we're having. We've now got London Fashion Week happening online. Yves Saint Laurent have announced that they're going to show on a completely different schedule to everybody else. And I think, yes, fast fashion's really not great for the world. Fast fashion, but nor is the whole luxury fashion either, in terms of sustainability. Yes, it lasts a hell of a lot longer, but the shows that are being put on is like the opposite of sustainable.
Oh.
And they're beautiful and they're incredible and they're works of art, but we've got to think of a new way of doing that, not to get rid of the beauty and the magic, because that doesn't need to be the cost of sustainability, but we just can't have them at humanity's cost. And that's the same with fast fashion. And there are actually companies who are onshoring, including ASOS, Boohoo, Misguided, who are actually getting their clothes made in the UK. Except that I suspect that their garment workers are being underpaid.
I don't know about everybody else, but I've been working quite a lot with ASOS's someone from ASOS, and they're paying, because they're working with Fashion Enter, they are paying living wages. They are paying, which is why I'm trying to support onshoring, because as well as the environment, I also, then we can start mapping who's being paid what, because I mean, as a half Turk, reading about the PPE that was delayed, that's not fit for purpose, but I'm not convinced that it's Turks making in Turkey at the moment. I think it's probably Syrian refugees in difficult situations. So what we're talking about here, I think, is visibility, collaboration and community. I love the idea of the Antwerp Six. I have very happy memories of going to Antwerp with Stephen Jones and his husband Craig, and it was absolutely amazing. If you can look it up, it was called Gerland. The whole city was taken over by Walter van Beirendonck, and it was absolutely brilliant. I just wanted to go back to Asker, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So we had a question about the pandemic and employment, how do we navigate these fears? Because fear is completely understandable. It's one of the most obvious human reactions to a sudden shock.
Yes, of course.
How do we contend with that?
It's not even an anxiety. You said it well. It's a fear, but it's a logical fear and a response to something that we are facing. But as I was analyzing market, because I did articles for Fashion Beauty Rush, for Elle magazine, for Fashion Magazine 42, and I think my editor is here, as I saw her. They are here. Hi, Vladana.
I use the computer of my husband. I'm Vladana, not Dejan.
Yes, and we also had few fashion forums upon this subject before this all started to happen. But to be honest, I don't see the future. Why? Because this is like a new industrial revolution. For example, when electricity was invented, it was a shock for everybody. Many people lost their works. And now, manual, simple work, we were afraid that IT will replace them. But no, actually just the lack of working places. And also I have to say that I'm afraid that even Marc Jacobs and, all the major high-class designers are not being very transparent when it comes to showing the way they're doing business. Because it's all about the profit, unfortunately, and I don't know what will happen with those people from India, from even here. I'm from Serbia, in the city where I live in. We have factories where people are working for such a small... Oh.
She's gone.
Oh, maybe some technical problem.
She went off the side of the... Yeah, is she back? No.
I think she'll back probably to fix the
Okay. Bev, I'm just going to come to you if that's okay. We had a question as well. New roles for design will be important in the context of the new normal. How do you, we touched on that, because I think that there's definitely a sense we don't need a ball gown unless we're a celebrity going on the Daily Mail to show how normal they are when they put the rubbish out. How do you navigate those needs and those desires? Because we do have desire, but then we also have need. So how do you...
I think the point is that I think the issue that we've had is that so many people are so familiar with the way that we've been working. In order to get your New Gen sponsorship, you have to deliver a certain criteria, which is, and I love Central St. Martin's and I love our education system here for fashion, but it's a little off. You're asking people to make a 15 look show, and that becomes your way of thinking about how you express your designs, and through that system you then produce a dress or garment for the customer. So the customer is 3 steps away from your thinking when you're designing. And if you look at a furniture designer or an interiors designer, they don't work that way. No. They don't have to work in this systemic way that we've, for good or bad, and I think for bad now, we're suffering. It's like an alien if you're like even if you're a knitwear designer, imagine. You have to do total looks. You can't just do the thing that you're good at doing. And you can't then go, right, I might make a blanket. I'm a fashion designer, And I think that the system supports that distinction. And I know that you work for creative industries as well. And I've always cross-pollinated. And that's the reason I've still standing. That's the only other reason is that I know what customers want, or I go and ask if I don't. And I'll go and ask, I'll go and collaborate with the hairdressers or Stephen Jones for the hats and this and that and the other. And it's somewhat what Fiona's been saying. It's that collaborative spirit, but that's also this stop navel gazing and go out there and see what you can do in the world. Okay, you might want to be making ball gowns, but you know what? You've got some satin. Why aren't you making some glamorous, fabulous kimonos or pajamas? And yes, it's off-brand, but you know what? I don't know who made that message in the first place. And of course, I do think it has come from education. And I'm not saying that, you know, the criteria of graduating as an MA student of Central St Martin hasn't created you know, some of the most brilliant designers of our times, because that's pretty obvious. But I think that, you know, we've stopped looking at how to design that product. Someone like Raf Simons does. He just did a fabric collection here for sofas that I've got on my table. You know, he's somebody who thinks outside of the box, and he'll never be hamstrung by that, you know, that idea that fashion is not relevant in all different contexts. I mean, la mode means, you know, means something in French that we don't necessarily have that connotation here in England. And I mean, it's amazing what Fiona was saying about the Blitz generation and all of those designers. Well, I mean, I've got a Derek Jarman book here. I mean, he did the most incredible fashion things and sets and for theatre and all the rest of it. And I think that actually, and it's to your point about the employment question, it's just roll your sleeves up and see what you can do and see where your creativity can have a final purpose. You know, I've been banging on to a couple of designers about, you're an amazing print designer. Have you thought about doing some cushion covers or something? You know, and you see someone like Mary Katransu, and she's done a rug collection. And I think it's also, you've got the brand, you've got the fashion brainwashing, and you've got this opportunity here where you can still contact and be in communication with your customers. And maybe you're doing something that's like £95, but it's not toxic, it's reusing old fabric, and it's keeping your customer engaged until such a time she might be able to go to dinner with her husband, you know, and might just buy one of your dresses.
Yeah, it's true actually, in a way. If you look at Matthew Williamson, he's arguably a better interior designer interior fabric and wallpaper designer than he is a clothes designer, and his arc into that has led to further opportunities. And
I think the other thing that
I think that's interesting.
The other thing that we're really missing is that we, in this fashion, you know, system, and I've been guilty of it a lot in the last couple of decades, you know, but there's this sort of snobbery when it comes to doing bridal, or, you know, something that's a little bit, well, it's you dressing a woman, it's ultimately couture, and it's got a commercial purpose, and it's not necessarily your vision of dressing that type of woman or influencer like a Kate Moss or something, but it's a real woman with real bucks. She's going to spend money, and she will still, when this lockdown ends, that girl's getting married, and she's going to wear the best dress of her goddamn life. And we just don't look at that. We don't teach our designers to look in those places, you know.
Right. So it's very linear. It's not horizontal, because with Brown's, for instance, Brown's Bride was propping it up before the family sold it on.
But it was like an intermediary sort of stop between you and the designer. And I think that we're doing a lot of work with designers on direct to consumer at the moment. And I think that there are these pockets of opportunity to stay alive, and I know that we're not thriving at the moment, but if we can stay in business and stay alive, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So we can diversify our skills and just re-lens how we're looking and operating at things. We're not going to do these 40 look collections anymore, and I'm thrilled as a consequence. If Christopher Kay could do what he did in one of the first collections, which was to do like 15 absolutely knockout,
the neon dresses.
He did this crepe collection where he did a crepe version of all of the dresses, but with a sleeve and this and that and the other, and in a bunch of colors. That would be fantastic. And I think that he would stay in a kind of we know that he's a visionary, we know that he's got all of these fantastic ideas, and we know the buzz and the excitement, but now's the time for a different type of thinking. And I think that designers need to rethink that. I think that show producers, photographers, editorial needs to rethink, how do we shoot? And why don't we have a commitment where we shoot 30% of what we shoot is from the last 2-3 seasons, or from dead stock, so-called dead stock, and let's reinvent it. Let's teach our wearers how to wear something from last season and the new season and re-envision it. That's the creativity that I'm looking for from our industry, because you know, you look at the war and, you know, taking all those parachute silk that Alber Elvar did, you know, when he was at Lanvin, that was like a military fabric that was, you know, dead stock, really, you know, and you just think the opportunity for creativity today, it's massive. So I think there's a lot of like, and Jelena was saying about how, you know, it's a fear instinct, but what happens when we're fearful is we don't necessarily go forward with a kind of confident viewpoint. And I think the trick right now is to feel the fear, but, you know, find your way around it. And it's not what you probably wanted to do when you graduated. You know, you wanted to be the head designer of Louis Vuitton or be the top show at London Fashion Week, but it's a new reality.
I think that's the point, and I think this comes back to I think why I set up Fashion Roundtable was I knew things needed to change, but I didn't have the answers. I still don't have the answers, but by creating a space that's new, I can have those conversations with City Hall and with Cabinet Office. I can promote UK manufacturing and therefore get towards change. And what I'm aware of is that without us there, the old systems just continued, and they haven't worked for a long time. And I knew it when I was a stylist, but I couldn't really do much about it, because as a stylist you're just trying to go from job to job, and so you're within the system. And now having this in-out opportunity, I do think that we can, what I want to see, and part of why I set this up was to offer change. We know the sustainable question is the issue of our lives. We know that this pandemic has come out of nowhere, but for me there's some kind of divine comedy going on, because we've hung on to not leaving the EU until the opportunity where, however we do leave the EU, has to change fundamentally, because we are all worse off. So we cannot, if we go into a hard Brexit, logically it's suicide. So it can't be, or it changes. And at the same time, we've known about sustainability, but not enough people have done anything about it, because they're just going to buy into the old models. And Jodie earlier said, oh, but look, you know, and you said, picked up on this, people want to be Christopher Kane or Victoria Beckham, even though they're only bought by about 8 people. I mean, so the business model's then propped up by either the husband or the collabs, or doing a makeup range, or selling a handbag designed by somebody else, or any other optics that are put on it. And that really is, I think that deserves transparency, because then that is collaboration. It's just a different form of collaboration. And what I hope we get to is that we get a less competitive, less isolationist mindset, because I do think it starts with education. Back to the point of, I think it was Andrew earlier on the comments, and I think that what we need to fight for, and what we do at Fashion Roundtable, is what's called STEAM education, so that children are not taught the most boring having home taught for the last couple of months, English and maths only in the UK, literally mind-numbing at the cost of their creativity, because we're not training people for the future. And at the same time, if we allow for people to work out, have time, because the Blitz kids had time, right? They had time. So who's the hairdresser we were talking about? Sam McKnight, who Fiona was talking to, used to work for my best friend's parents at Moulton Brown. That's where he trained. He had time because London was cheaper. Stephen Jones was able to squat in Warren Street with all those people because it was cheaper.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was going to say also, fashion was much less commercial then. They were doing it for fun. They weren't necessarily setting out to make a fortune. Whereas now you've got designers. It's the same things happening in art. Young artists want to make as much as Damien Hirst.
Yeah.
They don't get that historically people have done this for love.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
money.
I think where we're also getting to is a sense of worth, because if your worth is built on turning up, being all like this, I bought into it too, don't get me wrong, in your Saint Laurent and in your la la la, and then you're like, hang on, this isn't really working, and now it's not working because we're literally, well, we've probably got nice tops on for this call, but disclaimer, I have got my leg weights on. They've been on every day for 2 months. I'm sick of it, but that's been my reality. I think we're changing. We are changed by this because a habit is formed in 28 days or something. We're over 28 days into this. So I think what I'd really love is with these conversations is if we can get some ideas from you. If you could, Maria, can you just put your email address in? If you can feed into Maria, we're going to start with a survey, because from the survey, then we can start pulling this together to create a policy paper or a document that projects some kind of systems for change, because I think it's very clear that this new normal buzzword is because this is new normal, but what's it going back to? Because the old normal didn't work, right? And in fashion, you saw it more than in a lot of other sectors because the fast fashion escalation. I think she doesn't agree. We're all streamed and trained to be.
Yes.
Yeah, but I know that. I do know that because Boohoo's sales have gone up. But my role as the secretariat for all party parliamentary groups is to inform policy leaders, and from that, therefore, we can instigate change, because that's what our actions are there to do. So whilst I agree that unfortunately, and that is also why I want a platform for smaller designers, because they are so losing out unless, like Anna, you've got engagement with your consumer on Instagram. I had an email from somebody at City Hall yesterday about a small brand I'd never heard of in London floundering. Well, it's obvious London needs a platform then, because you can fight the algorithm, you can work with Google, you can, City Hall can call YouTube and Google and say, look, put us up the algorithm, help us make sales. Because at the moment, everybody's just fighting against these megalithic companies, and Amazon has done very well out of the pandemic. So I think that's how, it's about power.
Yes, may I just say something?
Yes.
Because I was disconnected. I was not careful enough when it comes to my computer. What you, Bev, and everybody else talked about new reality and new luxury. I believe, and I really strongly hope that those small brands who are supporting sustainable fashion and who are advocating for more conscious approach to consumerism are supposed to become a new luxury. I used to talk, and then I was disconnected about who is making our clothes. What will happen with all those people? And
Brexit is the key indicator of that, because and that's also been the issue of the furloughing.
Exactly.
So the manufacturers furloughing staff, some of those staff are Eastern European, they've already gone home. We might not get them back, which comes back to the education issue, which is why I've been fighting on what is the shortage occupation visa list work we've been doing, because factory workers, like a lot of the workers ironically in the NHS, fall under 25,600. So it's a bigger issue than this sector.
Yes.
It's the issue of valuing those who make, because I'm sorry to people who've heard me say this before, but my argument with policy people who don't really think about our world is, well, how much did your suit cost? If your suit cost you probably about £100, and this is a suit for a Whitehall official, then how much do you think the person making it earned? Because they did not earn over 30,000. So but you don't have the workforce here. So it's a much bigger issue about how we respect those at every level of the supply chain. I mean, my great grandmother was a seamstress. She worked for a couturier. So I've never seen the world lens through these hierarchies that perhaps other people do. But I didn't realize either that other people did see it so arrogantly, perhaps. And I think that this, you know, when we clap the NHS at 8 o'clock, we're actually clapping for support and show a solidarity, I believe, with people who have served us, which is why Bev's point about service, retail should be service. You should be serving your customer. And a lot of people, I think, have forgotten that and thought that they can tell, not serve. And
yes, of course, like a complex of God. And I was enjoying a lot while I was interviewing some people, like, so I have to mention Selena Gard and all that Northern European fashion scene. They were advocating and living sustainability long before we even started to talk about it. But when you go and see, Anna probably has it as well, when you go and see people actually doing something creative with all their hearts and all their body, right from the idea, and then sewing and making those clothes. You can buy her clothes on Net-a-Porter, for example, before this COVID, and many more brands. So that's why I hope that that will become a new luxury. And when it comes to the lack of jobs and working places, education, as you said, all those people are manual workers. They don't have a high level of education. So I believe offering free services for them to change. You know, I don't know, you know how to make shoes, so now you will learn how to do some simple things in IT sector, for example. So just change.
Which is why policy is so vital.
Yes.
I mean, we're going to have to wrap up now because we've done an hour, which is brilliant, because we used to cut off at 40 minutes when we had the free one. We've upgraded, guys, which has been a miracle. But the reason why policy is because if you look at what happened in this country, and I know this through all the conversations I've been having for the last several months about onshoring, and the last 2 months in particular around PPE, is we have small companies, mainly even in manufacturing, because of what happened 40 years ago in the UK when offshoring became the policy. So what happened with, for instance, a lot of the mining communities in this country is that there was local will into moving into other forms of supply, but they were ignored by policy. And it comes that's why I believe policy is vital, because that's, if you don't get to those leaders whose votes, those 650 people whose votes will decide every factor of your life in the country that you live in. And that's where in England, in Britain, we have that opportunity, is to really work with them. And I'm aware, particularly being half Turkish, that in other countries you don't necessarily have those luxuries, but I think that's why, for me, policy is so vital. So the one thing I'm asking is if everybody could email Maria any ideas. We are working on our representation and inclusion policy paper, which we've also shared the link to. Bev, I could listen to you all day talking about this, because I think you're so right about the ideas about service. I really do. I say that as my parents had salons, and, you know, definitely we were not there to, and I worked there from a very young age. So I think it's so important to regain that sense of service to your customer and your consumer, because you are there for them, not the other way around. And I think that arrogance has made it.
Another thing, Tamara, isn't it, like when you go, and I remember going to Barney's for the first time and getting a Barney's bag.
Isetan, when I was in Japan, amazing.
Incredible service, incredible attention. I mean, if you're going to go to a fancy restaurant and have this incredible service, why are we not doing it? Well, it's part of the price tag, as I said. People are like, oh, why does this garment cost so much? Well, part of it for me is that experience of buying it. And it doesn't mean that we can't do that online. It doesn't mean that you can't deliver service online that's exceptional, with a handwritten note that's intimate, that's beautiful and connected in this time where we're isolated. You know, that opportunity for connection and service, I think it's really where we need to think about evolving.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for everyone. Anna, I hope you felt you had enough time. Asker, I hope you felt you had enough time. Bev, I hope you felt you had enough time. And Fiona, thank you for coming in last minute when I just saw you and I thought, you know what, I really want her to talk about utility wear, which I'm very passionate about. Thank you very much. I've got to do a call about PPE in a minute, so I'm moving to that world. But thank you very much, and we normally do these on a Friday, but because it's VE Day, who knew that we suddenly celebrated VE Day, which comes back to policy, which comes back to political will. So I think that's why for me it's so important to just keep an eye on these things. And thank you all very much. I think in these difficult times, I feel a real sense of us showing our faces when we all feel quite isolated. And thanks also to Sarah and Maria and Jodie. And Alison, who was on, is an amazing IP lawyer. If you need to speak to somebody about IP, I think it's very interesting to speak to her. And Leanne, who is furloughed from the V&A, who is just here, is an amazing person to speak to when she goes back to work. We did a brilliant event with her, bringing lots of diverse voices into the V&A, which is obviously a hotbed of the establishment, and we called it Global Britain Local Stories. So it's really nice to have you all on the call, and have a great VE Day, guys. And hopefully I'll have some news on PPE very soon, but it's been a long time coming. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Fingers crossed. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
I don't know how to leave.